Our objectives for today are to compare and contrast, so tell similarities and differences between the ways that carbon, nitrogen, and water move through our ecosystem. And then you're going to be able to explain to me why we have to recycle matter in our ecosystem. All right, just like energy, which we talked about on Wednesday, matter moves through the trophic levels of an ecosystem. When we're talking about matter, we're talking about the physical things, right? Anything that has mass and takes up space is matter. Energy is constantly being provided by the sun. So there's this constant stream of energy coming from the sun. It passes through the trophic levels, some gets lost as heat, some gets used up, but it's constantly being provided, so we never run out of it. Okay? However, the same is not true for water, carbon, nitrogen, other materials in our ecosystems. Okay? There's not this convenient, fountain of water that's ever flowing that never runs out of water that could keep giving us water. There's a limited amount of water on Earth. So, if those substances exist in limited amounts, then how come we don't seem to run out of them? Well, that is because our world is set up to recycle those materials. So the water, the carbon, the nitrogen, all of the materials that make up your body have existed on Earth since Earth began, and they will continue to exist here on Earth until long after you are gone. They're being reused over and over again. So people like to talk about the carbon that's in your body very well could have been in the body of a dinosaur at one point in time. Okay? It's been reused. You may have caught the fact that we just addressed one of our objectives for today, which is that you'll be able to explain why matter must be recycled. So take a minute, turn to the person next to you, and explain why matter needs to be recycled. All right, somebody want to volunteer? Why? Why do we have to reuse material, matter? Why do we have to recycle it?
There's only so much.
There's only so much of it. It's in limited supply. It's not like energy where you can get more of it. You got to recycle. So let's look at some of those cycles that things are recycled in, okay? We have carbon. Carbon is an element that you may or may not realize how much you use every day because carbon is in the compounds of things that are living. It's in other compounds too, but there are not living things on Earth that don't have carbon compounds in them. You have to have carbon in order to live. It's very important, okay? When plants go through the process of photosynthesis, they use carbon dioxide, which has carbon in it. So they take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, and they use that in the process of photosynthesis. So not only do we need carbon compounds in order to build the structures of our bodies, but we also need carbon dioxide in order to get energy from the sun into plants, which, as we know, is the beginning of where all of us get our energy from. Okay? Also, when plants go through photosynthesis, they produce oxygen, which is another thing we need to survive. So not only is it helping us get oxygen and helping us get our energy source and then building our bodies. So we're beginning to see how important carbon is, right? And then when organisms break down their food during respiration, we produce carbon dioxide. So we actually put carbon dioxide back out into the environment. Okay? Us and plants have kind of a nice relationship there. We exhale carbon dioxide, they take it in, they produce oxygen for us, which we breathe in. It's very convenient. Okay? So we have all of this, we have this carbon that's cycling through us and plants as we exhale carbon dioxide and inhale oxygen, okay? But we also have carbon compounds in our bodies, and that carbon would stay trapped in our bodies if not for the very, very important organisms called decomposers. So when you die, your body will be broken down by decomposers, and those decomposers will take all those carbon compounds and put them back into the ecosystem, where they can be taken up by plants and they can be used to build new body structures and things for organisms in the future. So that's how carbon moves through our ecosystem. There are other materials that we need to move through our ecosystem too, and one of the most important is water. In the water cycle, because it's a nice big circle, we could really start anywhere, but the traditional place to start is with evaporation. And that's when water goes from being a liquid to being a gas. It evaporates from the Earth's surface, or from the surface of a body of water, or from plant leaves, and it goes up into the atmosphere. And then, as we know, warm air that's full of moisture rises. And as that warm air rises, it cools and condenses and turns into clouds. So it goes from being a gas to being a liquid, condensed on all of those little particles of dust and stuff that are in the air. We get clouds, and then when the clouds are holding all the moisture that they can hold, they drop it as precipitation. This is really how water cycles through the non-living part of an ecosystem, but as you know, living things need water as well. So water gets taken up by plants or gets drunk by animals so that they can use it for their body processes, okay? And then they either release that water through their leaves, if they're plants, through a process called transpiration, or animals will lose it in their waste, okay, or sometimes when we sweat. And then any water that is left in the organism also would be released when they decompose. And then that water, once it gets back out into the ecosystem outside of the plant or animal, it evaporates and that process starts all over again. So it just keeps cycling through. Water is recycled, but we have to be careful because human interaction can cause some problems here. We use water, right, to bathe and to get rid of our waste and to wash things. And anytime we do that, that water is contaminated, and we can't just let it back out into the ecosystem because it could carry all of those contaminants out to other organisms. So then we have to treat our water in water treatment plants before it can be used again. So as humans, we need to use water responsibly so that we don't start messing with the delicate balance that is the water cycle. All right, the last cycle, the nitrogen cycle. Okay. Nitrogen is a very important compound that all things that are living need, for a few compounds that are necessary for life. Okay, but as it exists in the atmosphere, it's not in a usable form. Okay, nitrogen gas is existing all around you. In fact, every time you take a breath, you're inhaling and exhaling nitrogen because it exists in the air, but your body can't use nitrogen gas. So you just inhale it and then exhale it right back out. Nothing happens with it. Okay? You need something to turn that nitrogen into a compound that is usable for your body. And that something is nitrogen-fixing bacteria that live in the soil and on roots of plants, or lightning can also do this process for you. And what happens is those guys change that nitrogen into compounds, and then those compounds are taken up by plants through their roots, and then plants use those nitrogen compounds, and then when animals eat them, we get those nitrogen compounds from the plants or from the animal that we ate that ate the plants. Okay? You have probably heard of a nitrogen-fixing bacteria or a plant that the nitrogen-fixing bacteria lives on because we are an agricultural state. So when you plant corn in a field, the year after, what do you usually plant? Beans. Okay? And that's because corn plants use a ton of nitrogen, and they essentially suck the soil dry of nitrogen. Beans, soybeans, have nodules on their roots where nitrogen-fixing bacteria live. So the whole time that the bean plants are growing in that field, they are fixing nitrogen and they're putting nitrogen into the soil. So then in the next year, when you plant corn there again, there will be nitrogen in the soil again for the corn to use. After plants and animals have used all their nitrogen, when those organisms leave waste behind or when they die and are broken down by decomposers, then that nitrogen is returned either to the ground in compound form, where it can be taken up by plants again, or it's sometimes released as nitrogen gas, which puts it back into the atmosphere, and then this process has to start all over again. Your homework for today is to make a three-way Venn diagram. Okay, so if you've never seen one, that looks like you have 3 circles and they all overlap. Okay, so notice there's a spot in the middle where all 3 of them are overlapping, and then there's spots where each of the 2 circles overlap. So one circle is for the water cycle, one circle is for the carbon cycle, one circle is for the nitrogen cycle. And you're going to be finding similarities and differences between them. So these big open spaces will be what is different about the cycle. And so then if you put carbon over here and nitrogen over here, this section in the middle here will be what's the same about or similar between nitrogen and carbon. And if you did water over here, then this would be between nitrogen and water, and this would be between water and carbon. And then in the very center, you'll put anything that is similar for all 3 of them. Okay? All right. If you have any questions or concerns or you get stuck, let me know. There's no minimum or maximum amount of things that you need to put on this, except that I would say you probably shouldn't have any boxes that are blank. You should be able to find similarities and differences for all of these, okay? But I'm not going to put a minimum number of things to put on it, okay? All right.